I'm going to first of all welcome you guys. Thanks for coming. And a big thank you, Andrey, for flying over from Amsterdam.
Yeah, it's great to be here. It's Tech Week in London, so always great to participate in.
You're one of those stories that I think everyone who's here is desperate to unpack because you've raised over 400 plus 500 million or so in venture funding, which is in of itself already kind of incomprehensible. Not only that, your company's worth almost nearly 20 billion now, which is also slightly incomprehensible. And then at the same time, you've done this by scaling globally, like having a team all over the world. And it all started with a product called Realtime Board. And I'd love to hear the story of how that happened. How was it that, with where we are today, you look back and you think Realtime Board?
Yeah,
Tell us that.
yeah, it's been a fun journey. I'm on this journey for 14 years since the company started in 2011. And we started with a very simple idea of bringing whiteboard into a browser. And people ask me these days, like, what the company they should start with, and it's like, what's the problem to solve? And my answer always is like, just pick up the simple, straightforward problem and solve it. Because sometimes we're trying to find like some complex problem or like niche problem, but in general, like there are so many problems in the world that we can solve. And like I was running creative agency back in the day, and we had distributed clients across different locations, and you can't brainstorm with those clients kind of solutions for them if you are distributed. And if you are in the same room, you obviously use the whiteboard. And we thought, okay, maybe we just take the concept of a whiteboard and bring it into a browser. That was super simple idea. We didn't have money to go for a proper branding. We were not creative enough. I'm not a native speaker, so we called the company Realtime Board because that domain was available on GoDaddy for $10. So like literally we were putting different descriptive names into GoDaddy, and whatever was $10 and whatever was kind of available, we took. And my promise to the team was, if this thing will take off, maybe we'll go and rebrand the company one day. So, and yeah, we just bought it and started building the product. So, and then in 2015, it was the first attempt to rebrand the company. We hired a guy who was like creative, and he came up with certain names, and we tested it with a bunch of our users. 50% said, just better keep your name. 50% said, take a new name. I decided to keep the name for a while, and then in 2019, I finally decided to rebrand the company and call it Miro. So, I mean, that was...
I heard it's inspired by the artist Juan
Yeah,
Miro.
Juan Miro, yeah.
Yes.
And yeah, I was kind of very excited to kind of change the name for the company, because again, from day one, I realized that this is not the name for the future of the company. It's the name for a company to start and prove that someone needs this, correct? And we've built quite a sizable business with that name, Realtime Board. A lot of people kind of still write me, hey, I'm a user from Realtime Board days. So we grew up to, I think at that time, like couple million users with the Realtime Board name. And the idea why we picked up Miro was that, like, when you think about the canvas, when you think about kind of Miro as a product, it's like this infinite canvas where a lot of the simple shapes and different colors. And if you look at Juan's Miro art, you will see quite the same. You will see this kind of different amazing like compositions where it's simple shapes, simple like very bright differentiated colors. And the idea was that we want to inspire everyone to be a little bit an artist when they interact with the Miro. So that's kind of the thing that we wanted to bring to the world. Is not just kind of a boring software to be a little bit better, productive, like 10% more productive, but actually to inspire people to create the next.
Well, I want to go into this idea of inspiring people to do things, but before I ask you that question, just for the audience, just to structure this conversation so you kind of know what we're going to be talking about. So I want to talk a little bit about the early days, and then I want to talk a little bit about go-to-market. You're famous for product-led growth. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. What was that like early days? Then I'm going to focus on early team and DNA of your culture. And then we're going to go into how you've built a global company. We're going to do a little bit about how you think about prioritization, because that's such a hard part for everybody in the room, is how do you prioritize decisions? Then those hard calls? How do you do hard calls in Miro, and then your personal journey? So we'll conclude with that. So that's the general map for the day. And I want to go back to that point about creativity. So, customers always have an opinion, and it's not necessarily the same as your opinion. I'm just curious, was there a time when a customer asked for something that went against your instincts, but you did it anyway? And what happened, and how did it shape the early roadmap?
I mean, a lot of times. In general, I believe at different stages of the company, you need to behave differently. It also depends on type of product you are building. So if you are building enterprise software, there are specific problems that enterprises have. So you better go and discover those problems and build backwards, correct? It's like you understand the problem well, you understand that this problem several customers have, and you just work backwards from requirements. In productivity, for example, you can't just do that. Like in productivity, you need to think what's that state of the future that may change the way how people work. What that state of the future that kind of allow people to get done more and whatnot. So it's a creative problem solving, I would say. And in our case, we build a lot of things in the first place from our head. But to build it right, you need to observe how people behave, how they use other software. So for example, I just start from the very beginning, and I'll answer your question as well. But the principle that I had is, okay, what are the patterns that I observe already that people kind of interact with the software? So there, when we started, there were different products. One was diagramming product, where people were individually drawing diagrams, and it was not collaborative product. Another product would be wireframing product, where people would put wireframes together. Another product would be mind mapping software. And what was unifying factor of all that, it was based on the canvas. And I thought, why would not we combine all those capabilities on one canvas, make it collaborative and make it like more of infinite, so you can kind of not just do one artifact, but you can build multiple artifacts. And that was kind of the point of view. So we came up with that point of view, and that's how we came up with a visual collaboration as a category eventually. And no one would ask us for that. No one would ask, like, can I have my diagram next to mind map and whatnot? But if you observe how people use software, if you observe common patterns, you can see those opportunities where you can create way more productive workflows. Now, in terms of what people ask, what not ask, like there were things that like people were asking and we were not prioritizing for a long, long time. For example, layers in the product. So it's kind of the feature that I was continuously deprioritizing for like 10 years in the product. And the reason why I was deprioritizing layers in the product, because I wanted to keep the product simple. Because when you add layers, you add complexity. Some people who will join the board might need to realize there are layers. People who are working with a kind of design software or diagramming software, they understand the concept of layers. But we were building for generalists, not for specialists. And for generalists, there is no concept of layers. It's like it's harder. You will not see some content that is hidden under layers, all that stuff. So I was intentionally deprioritizing layers to keep the product as simple as possible. So generalists don't kind of mess up or like kind of don't feel it's too complex for them. But yeah, recently, I mean, I think it was like around a year ago, we added layers, but we did it in a smart way because we've built a separate layer for diagramming, and that separate layer for those who want to do advanced diagramming, there is a layer functionality. And yeah, I mean, there are a bunch of stories like that where you need to kind of have an opinion. I'm not sure, like, if we do layers maybe 5 years ago, maybe we'll have more success with the product. You never know. But at least we have principles that we apply, and those principles are like just build it for generalists, not for specialists.
Yeah,
correct?
fair
And,
enough.
like, and you guide by that principle.
The product values for it and those principles. And there is an inverse question to that question, which is, was there something that you really struggled to kill or walk away from, and because you were emotionally invested in it, or a user segment was emotionally invested in it? What made it hard, and what did you learn from that decision of of having to make that decision?
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that. So I'm not emotionally invested in anything. I'm very rational what relates to the product. I mean, like if people need it, they need it. Like I don't care like who came up with this idea, myself, anyone else. Like if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. You have to change things. So, but I'm trying to think what we killed. Like we killed a bunch of things recently. I mean, we are now rebuilding the whole wireframing approach in Miro, and we see like there are tens of thousands of users who are using this kind of old wireframing libraries, and we believe there is a new way to do wireframing, AI first and whatnot, like do this kind of in a new way, and we are trying to bring the users on the journey with us because we believe it's like the way how you do it in the future. And yes, we don't want to keep a bunch of legacy things in the product. I'm trying to think what else. If something pops up, I'll tell you. But we're not killing too much in the product, and the reason why we're not killing too much because at the end of the day, we're building the product as a platform, and you have these building blocks, like or Lego bricks, if you will. And those Lego bricks works for different purposes for different people. But the core product, the core Chrome of the product, we keep super simple. Actually, one of the things that we killed a bunch of buttons from the Chrome of the product, from the key Chrome of the product, because we want that to be super simple. Now those capabilities you can find through the second level menus and whatnot, but we want people to feel like very kind of like with a lot of open air and like, you know, with a lot of kind of openness in the interface, so not to overload them, especially for those who are having the first experience. That's what we keep really kind of in simple.
Yeah, and that's important for acquiring customers because that's kind of what you're synonymous with. So this is maybe a good point to transition to how you acquired that. So you're famous for product-led growth. You know, you're almost like one of the poster children for when it's done really well. But as with most things in startup land, it was probably a series of ideas that you had or experiments that you ran. Tell me about one of them that you thought would work in terms of like a PLG feature, a PLG element to it, but it really didn't. And then how did you figure out that it wasn't working? What did you do next?
It's a great question. I mean, like there are a ton of examples that didn't work, but I'll tell you how to make it work actually. It's like the thing about experimentation and PLG is about the number of experiments you run. That's the only thing you can optimize. So, and that's the point. Like, it's not about one experiment that didn't work. It's about how many experiments your teams run at a certain point of time, and what's the failure rate you have. And if you don't have failure rate, it means that you don't run enough experiments. That's the number one rule that I learned, and that helped us to actually win. Because at the end of the day, it's like if you run like 2-3 experiments per quarter and all of them successful, it means only one thing: you don't run enough experiments. And we now run like hundreds of experiments in product. I'm not talking about gross marketing and whatnot. Like hundreds of experiments like a year in the product, like only in the kind of acquisition and onboarding funnel just there. And we're constantly failing. Like the things that like really were sensitive to fail around were kind of when we were experimenting with the business model. So one of the big things that unlocked our growth was the freemium business model that I was inspired by Slack's model. So I was on vacation and my team changed Skype to Slack. When I was on vacation, I was preventing the team from doing this because I understood that I will pay one day. But I waked up on vacation and I saw no one in Skype. And I'm like, what's going on here? And then I saw in the email this invite to Slack. I'm like, okay. They decided to do it anyway. And it was kind of the team of 20 people at that time or so. And especially when you are on vacation, you don't read Slack messages all the time. So
You don't?
no, yeah, I mean, now I actually do. Back in the day, we lived in a slower world. I didn't. Yeah, and then you kind of check it a couple times a day, and you can see the whole story of what happened through the day, because Slack allowed you for 10,000 messages to be seen in the free account. But then a few years later, we grew to 50 people in the team. And again, like when you are on vacation or somewhere, and you can't see what happened in the morning if you read it at the end of the day, because you only have 10,000 messages that you can see. And I thought that's an amazing business model, because you don't stop, like you don't create friction for people to kind of post content, whatnot. You don't create friction for people to add people into the account, but you actually create friction for people to retrieve information that you need. And that inspired some of the experiments that we did with the business model. And we obviously did some mistakes, because when you do experiments, you need to put guardrails, what you are trying to get out of that experiment and what you don't want to kind of lose, obviously. And yeah, we had a bunch of failures in terms of like what experiments didn't work in terms of business model. But at the end of the day, we found the model that doesn't restrict the virality, but which allows for a good conversion and a good kind of flywheel in terms of like adding new people and creating more content in Miro. So I think that's critical for product-led growth, to understand.
Any one experiment you want to share that was just a completely like nuts as an idea when you first heard it and you're like, actually that worked out?
No, I don't know. Like, the thing is, my experiments are quite good. Like in general, but I do a few things that I kind of decide to do.
Yeah.
But what I'm encouraging, for example, growth teams to do more and more and more and more. So it's like, again, like I'm now maybe given 2, 3, 4 hypotheses a year.
Yeah.
But I'm trying to figure out what are those major hypotheses I'd like to test. It's more or less accurate, but like when teams run hundreds of experiments, there is a lot of failures.
I want to come back to that decentralization. Sounds like you have in a global company in a bit, but in this arc of product-led growth and product-led sales, I was binge watching interviews of you before we spoke today. And you mentioned in one interview that in 2022, you transitioned to a sales-led growth model away from PLG, or maybe not entirely relying on PLG. And you didn't really go into depths as to why that triggered it. But I'd love to understand how you've decided to make that transition. What was the pain point you guys felt internally, and what was that early experiment like in this transition to a new model of go-to-market?
The reality is that, yes, we started in 2022, but we're still in transition mode. I can't tell you we fully transition. Now, we also don't drop product-led growth. We are combining those two models, and that's very complex. Like, if you think of what companies are doing that successfully globally, there are very few, just very few. And especially in our case, and some other collaborative software that is like more horizontal than not, it's extremely hard, because the value that you deliver is very different to different people, different kind of lines of businesses, different industries, different personas. There's like whole different set of things that you kind of enable people with, and you have to pick up a few, because when you do sales-led, you can run only few plays at the same time. When you do product-led, for example, Canva or us, where you have like this enormous, like hundreds or thousands of use cases, so you can put it on search engines, you can put it into paid acquisition, and you can get like this endless number of keywords that you optimize for. When you do a sales, like you can't do that. Like you can only, just bring to the customer 1, 2, 3 stories. That's it. So that's a quite challenge to combine that. Now, in terms of why we started doing this, in 2022, when the pandemic started to kind of slow down, and another thing was triggered, and it was kind of reassessing of what tools, what kind of software the companies have. And I was meeting with a bunch of CIOs at that time, and the general kind of sentiment was that we're going to reduce our tool stack significantly. So I remember one of the CIOs told me, like, we have 1,200 products now, software products that we're paying for, and our goal is to get to 250 at the end of this year. It's like, just literally like simplifying, reducing the tech stack, and it still continues, correct? But elaborate on what I see today because it's the craziest time I ever saw so far. Like the thing is that all of them start to say, okay, we need to streamline, we need to simplify. And obviously the budgets were kind of reduced, and to really kind of protect yourself, you need to tell the proper story, like what's the ROI, what's the value for what personas, like how to implement the software to get the most out of it. And that's a kind of a clear value sales. Like, yes, everyone would say, like, absolutely everyone loves Miro, but there are maybe this free, cheap, good enough thing that like I can bring in and like reduce my budget whatsoever, and like whatever Microsoft Whiteboard or whatever that product would be in the bigger companies. And you have to prove the value. You have to show how you kind of change the workflows of the organizations, and you can't do that through pure PLG. It's like it's impossible. Like at least I haven't figured out how to do it. So you need to build that kind of strategic alignment with the buyer, because people in the company, everyone loves Miro or like other products that came through PLG motion. But the decision is made by people who are not using those products. And they just see, okay, on paper, this might be doing this thing, this might be doing this thing, this costs this costs that. Let me kind of reduce my spend or reduce the tool stack. So, and that was kind of a big pivotal moment, because before we also built this enterprise PLG. What I mean is we had this model of FLP, we called it, Flexible License Program, where companies were initially buying the product, and then every quarter we organically grew licenses. We had a lot of kind of growth ways to organically grow licenses across the enterprise. And then we were coming like every quarter, every 6 months to the customer and say, hey, you had 100 licenses last quarter, now you have 200 licenses. Do you want to true up? And everyone was happy before 2022. Everyone was truing up. And that was our enterprise PLG. And in 2022, everyone said, no, I'll actually restrict everything so no one can start using your licenses without us permitting for that. And that was a complete change in the motion. And you have to navigate that. So like your enterprise expansion was not working anymore.
Yeah.
In the way.
So you had to sort of find the narrow sets of use cases that would convert.
Yeah.
But how did you reconcile that with what you're going on in PLG? Because right now, maybe fast forwarding a little bit, you're now positioned yourself as an innovation workspace. And in many ways, you do so many things that how do you reconcile the 1 through to 6 propositions you sell to an enterprise decision maker versus the PLG options and the SKUs of pricing for that? How do you reconcile all that?
I mean, it's all about like the end-to-end value that you deliver. And we kind of changed our narrative and changed our position to innovation workspace in October last year. As you mentioned, what we did, another thing that happened in the market is that there was a massive shift from best of breed software to best of switch software. So best of breed is like Miro is the best visual collaboration, Zoom is the best video communication, Slack is the best messaging, but then there is best of suite, correct? Like we can have all of that from one vendor, you know those names, obviously, all those vendors. And we understood that this is the thing, is like there is no best of suite anymore. Best of breed anymore, because the market got into this bundling phase. So the market was for 10 years in unbundling phase in software, and now we got into bundling phase in 2022. And I'm talking about the first half of 2022. We'll get to the second half, what happened next, which is crazy to us as well. So like the market got into bundling, and when you got into this bundling phase, these waves are for 5-10 years. Like you can't predict for how long. So we made a decision that we will not be best of breed software anymore. We need to build our suite. So we started to build like structured formats on Miro. I mentioned diagrams, like we added data tables, we added documents, we added a bunch of other capabilities on Miro. And the vision is that we support companies from discovery to delivery, end to end, as a workflow. And when we come to our customers today, and the story is, yes, obviously, if you run your innovation process on Miro, you accelerate time to market significantly. And we show that and we prove that, because obviously you don't need to copy-paste content between different formats. You have the whole AI-enabled flows where you transform from one stage to another, from discovery, from this divergent thinking to kind of product requirements to the like project breakdown. So like you can really move the project super fast with one data model in one place. And that's the story that customers love, because obviously they want to accelerate time to market. This is the metric that matters today. So that's kind of what we are doing, and we accelerate time to market for innovative teams, but we also help companies accelerate in general their velocity, correct? Because what's the operating model? Like if the company, like especially big companies, they have their ways of working or operating models, we also help them to accelerate kind of the way how they do business. So this is like a couple stories that we are positioning in front of customers, but from the PLG perspective, like people discover us through those more niche use cases, start using us, and then we build it up to the holistic end-to-end solution for the customer. So that's kind of how we navigated. The fun thing that happened to us on top of all that market shifts was obviously AI, because if we all remember, like November 2022, we were still beating this recession, bundling, all that stuff, and like on top of that, AI happened, and it got into it started to get into budgets late 2023 actually, with the Microsoft Copilot being one of those first solutions, and it was quite expensive. It's still quite expensive, and guess what, like Microsoft Copilot or other productivity AI sits in exactly the same budget as Miro sits. So, and to fund that thing, you need to continue finding money, especially when your budgets are getting cut. So, like, we start to fight for that kind of battle, and it's quite interesting going on. We've built a lot of AI-first solutions over the last couple of years, but we are kind of bringing it all together now. So, Miro is going to become quite a major player, hopefully very soon, in AI space. So, and because we need to shift kind of perception from just a pure productivity collaboration software that no one cares about, to something that is like 10x better for delivering.
And maybe that's a good point to transition to your early team, right? Like the DNA of the company. And if you think about the first 10 hires that you had, was there a particular hire that ended up shaping the company in a way you didn't expect? And what happened? Like, what was it that affected it?
I mean, it was just a team who was like super passionate about what we were doing. So there was there were no people, like no mercenaries, only kind of those who just want to win together. And we were not winning for a long, long time. So we start to see traction only several years after we started building the product, because no one knew how to build the product. No one knew how to build this software kind of business, and we had to learn it all.
Okay, so it sounds like you had some really good early hires.
Everyone was just like heads down, like building the product every day, and that was the only passion we all shared. The rest doesn't matter.
Well, that was part of the culture, right? So it sounds like you had a strong culture about just cracking on, doing things. But you kind of alluded to this, the answer to this question, but I assume that there's probably a version of this answer that's earlier than you mentioned, that you were on holiday and a decision was made without you.
Yeah, that
right?
was crazy.
And that means that there's a form of culture where certain decisions are done without you.
I would say that was more exception, to be honest.
Was exception, okay.
It was like, because yeah, I think that was more an exception.
Really?
Yeah. I was guiding the team quite close for the last few years, like because I had the vision of what we want to build, and I was just like very intentional about that vision. But that decision was actually more an exception.
So if you look at that decision maybe as an exception, was there still a moment where you started seeing culture forming without you or with you, and where you said, oh, this is a company that we're becoming, and you're looking at it sort of a CEO and founder looking at it from afar and thinking, wow, okay, this is forming with or without my intervention?
Especially in founder-led companies, the culture is a reflection of the founder in a lot of ways. And it's obviously a reflection of all your strengths and all your weaknesses. And what I, for example, didn't realize for a long time is that some of my kind of personal weaknesses are also kind of impacting the culture big time. And I didn't realize that I can potentially compensate for them with some other core people who will kind of also influence the culture in the right way in certain areas, correct? So I I think that's important in early days. Later, when we started to scale, obviously we brought a lot of external leaders to the company, and we started to see that the culture, especially like what happened to us. I mean, our journey maybe not super kind of repeatable journey, because we went from 200 people to 1,800 people in 18 months in 2020, 21. It's crazy. Like, I would never recommend this. And literally, there were no leadership in the company, no whatsoever. And I had to hire like 90% of the company, like several levels of leaders. And imagine like how that impacted the company, because every leader comes from their company's previous experiences. They do it differently. In Salesforce, you will do it differently from Amazon, from Google, from any mid-sized companies. Everyone brings their experiences, their ways of working. And at that time, we didn't have intentional, codified ways of working, because I was not prepared for this craziness. I thought we will grow like as a normal company, but then pandemic happened, and when pandemic happened, like 220 people, I think, and we ended up 1,800 people in 18 months. And I was not prepared for that scale. So we brought all the people, and they start to shape the culture in a way they can know how to do things. And a couple years in, we start to zoom out and see, okay, what actually we want to see as a culture here, and what actually the people we want to have here as a leaders. And the most important part is actually how the leaders in the company work together. That's the most important thing, because the mistake that, well, I don't know, it's hard to say, like, it's mistake obviously, but when you have to hire so many people and like fulfill the demand and grow 6x year over year, like what it was, 10 digits growth, was 10 digits revenue already. The mistake was that we didn't align as a leadership on the ways of working, and everyone was driving in their own way. And that's kind of a big thing that I would love to change.
All right, so pretend that it's you right now talking to 2020 Andrey, and you're sitting him down. You're saying, "Look, you're about to scale like crazy. These are you're going to go global with global leadership. These are the top 3 things I want you to do if you believe future me that you must do in order to prevent this chaos that's about to happen."
Top 3. Like, number one thing that I kind of obviously know I would do differently is you would hire for not for experience. You would hire for the mindset and for the kind of will to build something that is kind of special. Like, because the number one advice you will get everywhere is like, bring people who saw it, who know it, correct? Like, and that's the advice when you scale the company. A lot of investors would give it to you. It's just, and it's normal advice. But in today's world, especially with AI and everything, there are no people who saw it. In reality, and you need people who have a very kind of open-minded, who are open-minded, who are willing to experiment, who are willing to learn, who are willing to fail. And people in corporations not used to that. And well, it's like you can't fail if you're in a big company, or you can't acknowledge you're failing or whatnot. So it's very hard to find people like that, but they exist. Yeah. So you would hire for people who are learn it all, not know it all. Yeah. That's kind of number one. Number two, don't scale teams where you know there are problems in a certain leadership. So better wait, change the leadership, and then scale, rather than scale under leadership that you believe in 6-12 months will not be the right fit for the company. So just, again, like, go slower where possible, but don't miss the opportunity at the same time. So that would be the second one. And the third one would be yourself, because one of the things that I had to forget and then rediscover is who I am. So I had to adjust to a lot of people who came to the company. So I was like serving this person in the way that person prefers to work, this person in the way how that person prefers to work, because I was thinking, okay, they all know how to do it. and I'm here like first time in this journey, and I want to see how they do things. I want to kind of support them, and I kind of traded off a bunch of things that I thought we should absolutely do or how we should do things, and I was like, no, they know better. It's like because they done it, they saw it, and I was trading that off, and I kind of lost my conviction for a while. And then somewhere in like mid 2023, 2020, early 2024, I kind of found that moment where I like, okay, now it's all gone. Now we need to really build the plane again. Yeah. So now I need to rediscover myself and bring it back.
But how has that played out sometimes in how you look at yourself? Because I mean, there must have been a moment when you were given by somebody or somebody that matters to you really tough feedback about your leadership.
Oh,
and I'm wondering what was said, how did it land, and what did you do with that?
No, it's like there's the whole story around that. But in general, I believe that the best relationship, and this is what I love, for example, working with the kind of leaders we have now in the team, is that there is no one like right or wrong. We just need to lean in and listen to each other and try to kind of understand each other's perspective, where people are coming from. That's the best. The worst is like when people kind of have this fight response. It's not mature. And obviously it starts with me. In 2016, I was still running a small team. It was like 30 people. And I didn't realize a bunch of things that how I may influence people. And I hired a coach who came to our offsite. He helped us to facilitate offsite. And then we were drinking wine at 9 o'clock in the office. And he said, like, by the way, guys, I'm sure you have something to say to Andrey. Like, you are working 5 years together, like 30 people, this core team. And yeah, he said, like, if you want to share some of your observations or how he can be a better leader whatsoever, I don't remember how he framed it, let's do it now. And it was like 9 p.m. Friday in the office. So I remember I was sitting 12 o'clock at night on that sofa in the corner, and people were still throwing things on me. I was like, it was amazing moment. It was like, I got into this area of like conscious incompetence, correct? Like, because we operate majority of our time in conscious incompetence, so like you don't know what you don't know, and like you don't observe. But that moment opened up for me a lot of great kind of gifts. Then we start to work with my coach for several years, so it's like very fruitful conversation. But I mean, in general, kind of any feedback, anything that people share with you, like if you take it as a gift, people will come and bring more. If you kind of close up, if you don't kind of process that, people will not come and bring it anymore to you. And I have it like almost every week. Like it's like this is actually the culture where people are not afraid, like in my team, to kind of challenge me, say, hey, you better shut up here, like literally on the leadership meetings. And it's good because like I know I can say the same to them, and I know we have each other back, like because like we have very open relationship. Like no one is trying to kind of be nice to each other, and no one is trying to kind of please each other, but it all happens with the respect, and like we all know where like our strengths are, and like I shut up when I try to play in areas where it's not my strengths.
Yeah.
But they see it, and I say like, hey, like maybe you kind of pull back here and let us kind of figure it out. And I'm like, perfect, it's great, go and do it. And that's, I think, this is the team I enjoy personally. And I didn't have that for quite some time when I was kind of building the second team, because like people were nice to each other and whatnot. And it's like, it's not great. Like you need that team. Like you need to be all together. Like,
well, you just said something that kind of struck me is a very humble leadership element, which is to know when to back off. I mean, this is my last question to you. It's one that I think a lot of people in the room probably feel, which is when you feel completely out of your depth. And as a founder, many times you feel completely out of your depth in incremental ways that you know that you will solve. So that's not what I'm asking. I'm asking, was there a moment in the history when the company was growing where you literally felt completely out of your depth and you had to keep it together for the sake of everyone around you? And how did you get through it?
It's a great question. It's quite broad. I think in general, like, companies are growing exponentially. People are growing linear. So just by default. In our case, company grew not just exponentially, it's like this, and I'm still a human. I can only grow linear, and obviously for a long, long time, and still, I'm still out of my depths. It's like it's clear that the company that I'm running, like, is requires certain skills. So if you think in like 2020, I was running the company of 200 people, mostly co-located. And then a year later, it was like 1,800 people, hundreds of millions of revenue, and kind of complex CXO type of relationships. Like your life didn't prepare you for that before. So you obviously need to step back and understand, okay, this is the company you're running. What are the critical things you need to understand, learn, like in terms of building the teams, building the culture, managing expectations with the customers, building the product for that scale, building the second act, building the multi-product. Like all those things are like happening daily. Now, again, like we were, then pandemic ended, then you have this recession. You again need to regroup the whole company, correct? Like what's the next horizon? So it's like every day, and then now with AI, like how the workplace of future looks like. Like, of course, no one knows. There's no CEO in the world who knows how to do it, right? And you have to learn, constantly observe, ask questions, reflect. And I think what helps me is I'm going to people around me and I'm asking for just kind of sanity check. Like I have this conversation with the leadership team, for example. Hey, folks, like, do you feel like I can add value here, there, or like I don't add value? It's not like about do you trust me or not. It's more about, hey, we're in this situation as a business, correct? Like this is our setup. Like, do you think we can do better if someone else will do it? Like, or should I do it and whatnot? So you need to get that check with the people around you. But one thing that we should not forget about is that, like the board told me this, it's interesting. It's like the success rate of founder-led companies versus externally hired people-led companies is like significantly different. And the reason why is like, as a founder, you really deeply care. It's not a job, correct? Like you don't do it as a job. You do it as your kind of thing. And that's why like the success rate is like significantly higher. The question is like how you acquire skills fast for the ever-changing world. And for me, it's kind of having the people around me that I can ask for advice and just constantly learning from people. But what matters is like, do you really care or not? And if you care and if you're open to learn, you will learn. If you don't care or you're not learning, then maybe it's better kind of to think who else will
To
be
move
best.
on.
Yeah, to move on, and someone else will be doing a better job.
Cool. Well, I know I promised you I would get you out in time to go see our friends in space. So I just wanted to thank you for your time. It's been an amazing chat. I really loved it. And, I speak on behalf of the audience. I hope you guys enjoyed it as well.